Truce on Deadstone. The transport shuttle rattled like a tin can in a storm as it cut through Alcari's thin, dusty atmosphere. From the viewport, the moon looked like a corpse, pockmarked by craters, scarred by old meteor strikes, and utterly devoid of life. A fitting place for a prisoner exchange after a war that had cost billions of lives. Major Elias Varn sat strapped in, his gloved fingers gripping the armrests with knuckle-whitening force. His jaw clenched as he stared out at the gray wasteland. He wasn't nervous. Not exactly. But something about this place itched at him. Not just the barren surface, but the silence. The Vekari had agreed too quickly to the ceasefire. That was the first red flag. ETA 2 minutes, came the pilot's voice over comms. Vekari landers already set down. They brought a lot of guards. Of course they did, Elias thought grimly. The Vekari didn't do anything without an overt display of power. It was how they'd waged war, through intimidation, cruelty, and overwhelming force. And yet here they were, at the table, asking for truce. Beside him, Lieutenant Marin Cho tightened her helmet straps, eyes alert behind the visor. Young, sharp, and unshakable in combat. She'd saved his life twice during the siege on Vesta Station. She leaned toward him slightly. Still think this isn't going to go sideways, sir? Elias didn't answer at first. He just kept staring at the landing site coming into view, a flat stretch of gray rock lit by artificial floodlights, surrounded by defense drones hovering like lazy vultures. It'll go sideways, he muttered. Everything involving the Vekari eventually does. The shuttle touched down with a low whine. As the hatch cycled open, heat and dust rushed in. Elias stepped out, flanked by 4 armored soldiers and a medic. Across the no-man's land of scorched ground stood a dozen Vekari warriors, towering, insectoid brutes, their chitin gleaming under the pale light. At their center was a figure Elias recognized immediately. Commander Vreksha, the Butcher of Blackreach, taller than the others, with a jagged scar bisecting his facial plating and a ceremonial staff clutched in one clawed hand. His black eyes gleamed like wet obsidian. Elias didn't flinch as they locked gazes. "I greet you, human," Vreksha rasped through the translator mounted on his thorax. His voice buzzed like a malfunctioning engine. "We bring your prisoners, as agreed." Elias nodded stiffly. "And we bring yours." The exchange began in cold silence. The humans released 12 Vekari captives, each one sullen but physically intact. The Vekari released 8 human POWs. That was all that remained of the Fort Arclight survivors. They were gaunt, hollow-eyed, and moved like they were dragging invisible chains. One stumbled and fell. The medic rushed forward. Elias bent down beside the fallen man. A corporal named Jonas Ruiz, one of the youngest soldiers assigned to Arclight before it fell. His skin was pallid, bones sharp against thin flesh, and his eyes were bloodshot, blinking slowly like he didn't quite know where he was. Elias put a hand on his shoulder. "Ruiz, it's Major Varn. You're safe now. You're going home." Ruiz's cracked lips moved. At first, Elias thought he was hallucinating, but then the words came. "Don't trust the truce. They're hiding something. Underground." Then he collapsed, unconscious. Elias's heart thudded. He looked up at the Vekari line. They were watching. Too still. Too calm. Vreksha tilted his head, as if he knew exactly what Ruiz had said. A chill crept down Elias's spine. He stood and motioned for the medic to carry Ruiz to the shuttle. The other recovered prisoners were already being scanned and stabilized. But the look on Cho's face told him she'd heard it too. "What do you want to do?" she whispered. Elias didn't answer. He just watched Vreksha turn and begin to walk back toward his lander, his insectal legs clicking on the rock. "We play nice," Elias said under his breath. "For now." Then, louder, exchange completed. "Let's move out." As the team boarded the shuttle and the hatch closed behind them, Elias took one last look at the desolate moon's surface. He felt it in his bones. This wasn't over. This ceasefire wasn't peace. It was a setup, and humanity had walked right into it. Unquiet flesh. The medbay lights buzzed faintly overhead, bathing the interior of the human transport shuttle in a cold, sterile glow. Corporal Jonas Ruiz lay unconscious on the examination table, hooked to a biomonitor that beeped slow and steady. His vitals were stabilizing, but something was wrong, deeply wrong. Major Elias Varn stood with arms crossed, watching the medic run scan after scan. Frustration etched into the man's furrowed brow. His nervous system's been tampered with, the medic finally said. It's not just trauma. There's foreign tissue grafted to his spinal cord. Vekari bioorganics. That shouldn't be possible. Elias's gut twisted. Ruiz's last words rang louder now. Don't trust the truce. They're hiding something underground. He turned to Lieutenant Cho, who stood nearby, helmet clipped to her belt, sweat beading her brow despite the cool air. Did we get a full topographic scan of the Vekari side of the landing site? Elias asked. Cho nodded. Standard passive sweep. Nothing obvious. But we didn't do deep thermal. Ceasefire protocol limited scans to surface-level mapping. Elias's expression hardened. Run a deep thermal now. Quietly. I want eyes under their feet. Cho didn't argue. She simply moved to the terminal and started typing. A few tense minutes passed as the scan resolved, and then, got something, she murmured. Look at this. The screen displayed a cross-section of the moon's crust. At about 30 meters down, beneath the Vekari lander, was a complex network of chambers, giving off low but active heat signatures. Not natural, not storage. Built. One chamber in particular pulsed with concentrated heat and bioelectric signatures. Alive, Cho whispered. There's something alive down there. Elias stared at the image, his jaw clenched. We're going in. Cho raised an eyebrow. Ceasefire. Is a lie, Elias snapped. I'm not letting more of our people go back to Earth with something crawling in their heads. Gear up. Quiet team only. Minutes later, Elias, Cho, and 2 commandos exited through an auxiliary airlock and moved across the crater's edge, cloaked under electronic camouflage and the cover of darkness. The Vekari lander loomed in the distance, its shadow stretching like a claw across the barren plain. They found an entry point behind a rock outcropping, a shaft disguised as geological fault, just wide enough to drop into. As they descended, the light faded, and the stale, metallic stench of rot clung to the walls. 50 meters down, the tunnel opened into a vast, dimly lit cavern, and what they saw turned Elias's stomach. Rows of tanks lined the walls, filled with green fluid and floating shapes, some fully Vekari, others clearly human, and some caught in between. Twisted bodies, chests sewn open, neural implants visible, limbs mismatched. The hybrids drifted like puppets without strings. Cho stepped forward, shining her light on a nearby terminal. She began decoding the interface. These are experimentation logs, she said, voice trembling with disgust. They've been using our soldiers to test neurografting, trying to make obedient warriors with human cognition and Vekari resilience. Elias stared at the grotesque forms in the tanks. This is what the prisoner meant, he said darkly. The ones they gave us back, they could be infected. Trojan horses. Then he heard it. A hiss, followed by a sickening wet pop. One of the nearby tanks cracked. The fluid spilled out, and the creature inside collapsed onto the floor. A humanoid figure twitched and writhed, metal glinting in its skull. And then, with horrifying speed, it leapt. Elias fired. The shot cracked like thunder in the chamber, and the hybrid dropped mid-lunge. Its body convulsed once, then went still. When Cho scanned it, her face went pale. Cortical implant. The moment it was exposed to oxygen, it tried to activate, trigger a neurovirus, target-rich programming. These weren't survivors they gave us. These are weapons. A klaxon shrieked somewhere in the depths. Damn it. They know we're here, Elias barked. Below the data core. Wipe everything. Then we fall back. The commandos moved swiftly, setting thermal charges on the central terminal. Elias gave the room one last look. At the tanks, the twisted bodies, the violation of everything he believed humans, and even their worst enemies would never dare. No one deserved what had happened here. Not even the Vekari. Charge set, Cho confirmed. Ready to move. As they sprinted back up the shaft, the distant echo of Vekari voices filtered through the tunnels, clicking, snarling, organizing. They would descend in numbers soon. Back at the shuttle, the human prisoners were being checked again, this time with deeper scans. 2 more showed signs of neural implants. One had already begun to seize. Elias watched as the medic sedated him, grim as stone. The war hadn't ended. The ceasefire was a weapon, the exchange a deception. "Give me fleet command," he said coldly. "Now." Cho looked at him, fury simmering behind her calm exterior. "What do we tell them?" Elias didn't hesitate. "We tell them peace was a lie, and we just walked into hell without our guns drawn. Blood for blood." The moment the first explosion rocked the subterranean lab, Major Elias Varn knew the ceasefire was dead. A plume of fire and dust burst from the side of the crater, blowing a chunk of the moon's surface skyward. The cavern system, filled with the Vekari's grotesque experiments, was collapsing beneath their feet. Above, floodlights flickered. Panic swept across the exchange site. Vekari warriors shrieked in their native tongue, antennae twitching, weapons raised. On the human side, Marines rushed to formation, instincts overriding diplomacy. Both sides had come armed, but only one had known the truth. Elias emerged from the tunnel, face streaked with grime, rifle raised. "Lieutenant Cho, status." She was already barking orders into comms. 2 of our POWs confirmed infected, 1 sedated, 1 neutralized. Medical evac prepping. Fleet command received the evidence package. Live feed, logs, everything. Elias turned toward the Vekari lander just as Commander Vrekshaw stepped forward from the swarm, his blade staff gleaming red in the moonlight. He didn't seem surprised. "You found it," the alien rasped. "You left a man alive," Elias growled. "And you underestimated how far we'd go for our own. Your kind burns with vengeance." "Predictable." Vrekshaw cocked his head. "The ones we returned were gifts, a test of human adaptability. Evolution. You mutilated them," Elias shouted, stepping forward. "You hollowed out their minds and filled them with poison. There's no word in your tongue, or mine, for the kind of evil you brought to that place." Vrekshaw's mandibles clicked once, slowly. "You're wrong, human. There's a word." Then he lunged. The blade came down fast, too fast. But Elias had already moved. The rifle barked twice, once to the torso and once to the leg. The alien shrieked and crashed into the dust. The standoff shattered. Vekari warriors surged forward with feral cries, weapons raised. Human Marines opened fire, and within seconds, the prisoner exchange turned into a battlefield. Elias ducked behind the shuttle's landing strut, bullets and plasma bolts cracking the air around him. A Vekari charged, mandibles open, blood mist foaming from its mouth. Elias dropped it with a burst to the chest. "Fall back to defensive formation Alpha." Cho's voice rang out. "Protect the prisoners." The human team was outnumbered, 20 against over 40 Vekari, and more spilling from the shadows. But the humans had something more dangerous than numbers. A righteous fury that ignited their every shot, sharpened their reflexes, and erased fear from their hearts. One Marine, Corporal Rice, took a plasma bolt to the shoulder but kept firing one-handed. Another, Sergeant Milo, dove onto a Vekari bomb drone and detonated it manually, taking 4 with him. They didn't fight for strategy anymore. They fought for the brothers who had been carved open like animals. They fought for the silence in Ruiz's voice and the twitch in the medic's hands when he realized one of the returned wasn't human anymore. And Elias. Elias fought like a man with nothing left to lose but his fury. Vrekshaw crawled from the dust, legs shattered, leaking black ichor. Elias stood over him, rifle trembling in his hands. "You think we'll stop?" Elias spat. "You think Earth will still want peace after what we show them?" Vrekshaw laughed, a dry, clicking rattle. "Then you are a fool. Your fleet is bound by protocol. Your leaders by fear. But you are different." "I am," Elias said, and struck the alien across the face with the butt of his rifle. The tide turned. Human Marines regrouped, tighter, angrier, faster. Cho led a charge through the flank, clearing the last of the Vekari around the lander. The ground was stained with blood, red and black. Then the command channel lit up. "Fleet Command. Varn, This is Admiral Greaves. We've seen the footage. The Council has authorized escalation. You're free to engage. Total retaliation. Protocol Black Echo confirmed. Cho looked at him. We're going back to war. No, Elias said quietly, watching as the last Vekari survivor dropped their weapon and fled. We never left it. He turned toward the shuttle, dragging the wounded Vrekshaw behind him. Prep a holding cell. He's going to testify. On record. And I want him to watch every second of what comes next. Cho nodded. The prisoners? Secure. Scanning every one of them before we return to orbit. We're not letting another Trojan through the gate. As the battlefield quieted, a new sound rose. Not of death, but of resolve. Human boots crunching over ash. Medics checking vitals. Marines standing taller than they had minutes ago. The war wasn't over. But now, the gloves were off. Ashes and oaths. Stars glinted cold and distant above the moon Alcaris. Uncaring witnesses to the blood spilled below. The makeshift battlefield, once a sterile zone for diplomatic exchange, was now a cratered ruin littered with broken armor, spent cartridges, and bodies, human and Vekari alike. Major Elias Varn stood on the ridge, visor up, staring at the shuttle's open ramp where Commander Vrekshaw lay bound and broken, his breath shallow, ichor oozing from a dozen wounds. Fleet medics had stabilized him, just enough to keep him alive. Because vengeance wasn't enough. The truth had to speak. A gust of lunar dust swirled as Elias turned toward the command post. Inside, a small fleet comms rig flickered with blue light. A hollow projection of Admiral Greaves hovered above the console, gray-haired, hard-eyed, and freshly briefed. Confirmation received, she said, her voice low and bitter. The Vekari violated over 17 provisions of the Truce Accords. Neural assimilation, biological warfare, human experimentation. Ruiz died 10 minutes ago. Elias cut in, voice hollow. His heart gave out. His scans showed widespread neural corruption. We tried everything. There was a beat of silence. His name will be honored, Major, Greaves said, as will yours. But I didn't call to give condolences. I called to give you this. A flash of red spread across the holomap. It marked new orders. Operation Blood Vow. You are authorized to lead immediate retaliatory strikes against all known Vekari biosites within the Alkari system, Greaves said. The Council voted 32-3. No more diplomacy. No more trust. If they wanted war, they have it. And this time, we finish it. Elias nodded once. He didn't smile. There was nothing to smile about. He turned as Cho entered, wiping dried blood from her gauntlet. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed, but her spine held straight. 3 more POWs tested positive for latent neural intrusion, she reported. We're isolating them. No active consciousness transfer yet. Elias's jaw worked, but he said nothing. The silence said more. Then Cho's eyes dropped to the motionless figure behind him. And him. Elias looked at Vrekshaw, the butcher of Blackreach, once revered in Vekari war councils, now bound in chains forged by those he called prey. He talks, Elias said, or he dies nameless and unremembered. He walked toward the alien, crouching beside him. You infected my men. You used our trust as a weapon. Why? Why show peace, then slaughter? Vrekshaw opened his eyes slowly. His voice, when it came, was quieter than before. Not in submission, but something worse, certainty. You feared extinction, so you became predators, he rasped. We respected that, but your adaptability, it frightened our overmind. The old ways failed. We sought evolution, union. Our methods were premature. You turned soldiers into weapons, Elias growled. We found tanks. The hybrids. You hollowed them out. We honored them, Vrekshaw hissed. We gave them purpose beyond mortality. A species bound to flesh cannot win forever. You, Elias, punched him across the mouth hard. The alien coughed black. Save your philosophy, Elias snapped. I've buried too many good people to listen to sermons from monsters. He stood, turning to Cho. Lock him up. Deep stasis. No comms, no link. Then prep the strike plan. We hit their biosites. Fast, surgical, no survivors. Cho gave a slow nod. You want me to notify Earth Command? Not yet, Elias said, looking to the stars again. We do this first. We sent a message. That night, fire fell from orbit. The Vekari breeding chambers on Calda Minor, gone in one blast. The neural lab hidden beneath Orus Ridge, sterilized with napalm. In 12 hours, 5 major sites across the Alkari system were reduced to ash. And through it all, Elias stood at the command helm, watching every detonation with haunted eyes. He wasn't proud. He didn't celebrate. He remembered Ruiz. He remembered the fear in the prisoners' eyes when they woke screaming. He remembered the Vekari word for what they'd done. And he made himself a promise. Never again. Not just for vengeance. For humanity. For every soldier who still believed the price of peace shouldn't be betrayal. As dawn broke across the dead moon's horizon, a pale sliver of gold cutting through endless gray, Elias stood alone on the edge of the crater, helmet in his hand. Behind him, Cho approached silently. You know this won't end here, she said. The Vekari will retaliate. Maybe worse than before. Elias nodded, eyes never leaving the sky. Let them. She stood with him for a while, the silence between them full of things unsaid. Then Elias whispered, more to himself than her. If they want to see what humanity becomes when it's cornered, we'll show them. No more treaties. No more restraint. Only fire.